This is Jewish Spotlight, a weekly television program presented by Chabad Lubavitch of Long Island, featuring various aspects of modern Jewish life and Jewish culture. Now, here is your host, Rabbi Tuvia Teldin.
We discuss, we talk about, we struggle with the issues, and we usually think of it in political terms, but we don't always think about what's going on in the Middle East on a very personal level. And the fact is that on a very personal level there are thousands and thousands of lives that are tremendously affected on a day-to-day basis for years to come by what's going on. 500 people, 500 Jews, lives have been lost, thousands upon thousands have been injured, and the injuries are not just a matter of scratches and band-aid solutions. Serious, serious injuries. Just to put the Intifada onto a personal level, and to give you an opportunity to meet somebody on a first-hand basis who's gone through a very personal tragedy and personal difficulty, I want to introduce you to a family who lost their mother and wife to the Intifada. We'll talk to them, find out about their lives, how they were just people, and still are, people like you and I, just who happened to be hit by an Intifada in a very personal way. It's, I don't know if I can say it's my pleasure, but of course we're happy to have you with us. This is Mrs. Adina Mark, and of course Norman Blaustein, Sarah's husband, and Sammy Berg, Sarah's son. I'm, of course, humbled to have you with us, and I only wish you and your family health and only the best of things for the future. And I very much appreciate you coming on. I'm sure it's not an easy topic to discuss, and you've told me that you feel you really want to get the word out there because Sarah had a message and you have a message, and it's a message I think that the world needs to hear as well, to really get inside a little bit of what's in your minds and your hearts, that they should know what is really happening in Israel on a very personal level. First of all, if I could, I understand, Adina, you were here in Cedarhurst by your home at the time of Sarah's murder, and Norman and Sam, you were in the car with Sarah at the time.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we talk a little bit about the event itself, just as a way of introduction so people will know, at least a picture in their mind of who Sarah was and is, I'd like us to show a little bit from a poster which has pictures of many, many of the people who were killed in Intifada, to be able to see Sarah's face. And I'm asking for a specific reason. If we can go over to that, you see in the middle is Sarah Blaustein, 53 years old. The tragedy occurred on May 29th, 2001. Now to the right is Esther Alvin, 20 years old, who was a hitchhiker, who was in the, I believe, the back of the car, Sammy. She was sitting next to you in the back.
Yes.
She was hitchhiking, and why was she hitchhiking? She was just leaving the town of Efrat where the Blausteins were leaving, and she jumped into the car. Why? Because she had to go to Jerusalem to attend the funeral of the man who was just to the left of Sarah in that picture, who had just been killed that morning, and she was attending his funeral.
Right.
What a tragedy.
Right.
So Norman, can you give us an idea of what happened at that tragedy? As you got in the car, you were on your way to Jerusalem, where were you going?
Well, I guess to begin with, when we left the house, we live in a community called Efrat, which is about 15 to 20 minutes away from the heart of Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. We got into the car and we started to leave, and a common practice is if you see people wanting to get a hitchhike, you'll stop the car and pick them up.
Okay.
I had Sammy and Sarah, and four hitchhikers got into the car, and we started out. We made a right turn.
They were inside the gates of Efrat, or this was already outside the gates?
Inside the gates.
Inside the gates. Is there a lot of security on the outside of the gates of Efrat?
Right. Yes.
There is. Okay. So you went through the security.
We went through the security. We made the right turn, and then and about 5,000 yards later, you make another right turn, and now you're on the main highway.
Okay.
In front of us was a truck, and we couldn't get past it. We went past one community, and then we started going to another community, and there was an opening for me to get by the car, get by the truck. And as I was going by the truck, there was a white car in back of me who also was attempting to get by.
Right.
And the next thing I knew is that I was hearing some crackling sounds in the car. And my glasses flew off, and I knew I had to pull to the right, but not too far because we were going over it was like a little mountain, and it could have been, so I was able to do that and stop the car, and I looked to the right, and I saw that my wife was smiling, but her eyes were closed.
She was smiling.
Yes. Sammy was complaining that his arm was hurting. I called on my cell phone. I called my brother-in-law to let him know that we were hit. And then people were screaming.
Do you know how many shots there were fired altogether?
We found out there were over 12 shots that hit inside the car.
12 shots.
Right. They sprayed the whole front of the whole back, side, and front of the car.
Where were they shooting from?
They were shooting. They came around. It was a drive-by.
Oh, so it was the white car that was behind you.
It was the white car. And there were 2 bullets that hit the front of the car, and I believe both bullets hit my wife. At the same time, I believe there was a bullet from the back of the car that murdered the young lady. The car was stopped.
Fortunately, you were able to maintain your presence to be able to stop the car and make sure that it shouldn't get any worse.
Right. We got out of the car. I started to try to get my wife out, and at the same time, within 2 minutes, there was a van from Hebron who was also attending the funeral, and they saw us on the side of the road, and they jumped out. And within 10 minutes, there were ambulance and doctors, and it seemed like half of the front was there. And that was it.
And Sarah was...
Well, they took her out.
They realized...
They laid her down, and they took Sammy out. They took Esther out, the other girl. And there's some other people who were hurt. They tried to bring her back. And in fact, they brought her back for about 10 minutes.
Really?
And that was it. Esther,
They brought her back, meaning...
They brought her back to life.
She was
never
conscious.
regained consciousness.
She didn't regain consciousness.
No, but she
were
was
able to-
breathing for about 10
Okay.
minutes. I was trying to go to help, and they pushed me aside. I fell down. Blood was gushing from my nose. What more can you say?
Not much. Sammy, tell me, you went there just for the holidays, just to visit for the holiday of Shavuos.
Yes.
And you were planning on just spending a few days there, I suppose.
Yeah.
When you went there, you knew about the dangers of going to Israel, or it really didn't affect you? You were just going to visit your parents?
I knew about them, but I wasn't, I don't know,
Just didn't affect you at all?
it's like worrying about going down to Manhattan and being attacked over there, you know? That's how much it
Right.
worried me.
Right. And then after this happened, I'm sure you were probably in a
This
total
has happened,
disbelief.
I haven't, except for my mother's Yurt, so I haven't been able to go back to Israel.
Haven't been able to go back.
No.
Do you struggle with that at all, or it's?
I'm sorry?
Do you struggle with that at all? Would you like to go back, but you just can't?
Of course I would. I have
emotionally
family
get
there. My little brother lives there, my little sister lives there, Norman lives there, I have cousins live there.
you? Right. It's because there's too much fear in you? Is it just you don't want to bring back all those emotions and feelings?
Probably a little of both. For the more the first, probably more fear.
And Adina, how did you hear about your mother's passing?
Well, being that in Israel they keep one day of holiday, in the United States we have 2. So for us it was a holiday. We were in temple, just finishing up actually. It was late morning
You pray in the Chabad synagogue in
in
Cedarhurst.
Cedarhurst.
Right.
And it was a beautiful, sunny, warm day. It was May 29th. It was a beautiful spring day. And they had somewhat of a party, a l'chaim, so to speak, going on outside of the temple. And word got to my father, who drove over and basically told first, he didn't know how to tell it to us. He knew what happened, but he didn't want to come bursting into the temple. And so he pulled over the rabbi and his wife, who are dear friends of ours, my husband and myself, and he told them and asked them, what should I do? How should I tell them? And they felt it was best to get me home. At that point, my husband knew. They told my husband, and everyone just remained calm and kept it inside. And we went home. They brought me home, not saying a word. And my other brother, Yoni, had already gone home. He was in my house. And, you know, thank God I had a lot of family and friends around for the holiday. And they just, you know, took my children aside. And my husband pulled me aside privately and told me what happened. Within moments, there was press at the door. Everyone had heard the news. People had heard it. Yeah, yeah. The local papers had already come to the door. You know, some of the information was somewhat mixed up. They had, you know, who was injured and who was killed. They had somewhat mixed up, but we knew because we had heard it direct from the family in Israel.
Okay.
They wanted some sort of statement, comment, interview.
Right.
We did the
Which I'm
best
sure
we could.
You weren't exactly up to.
We just did the best we could. We were really in a state of shock.
I know that you've been a spokeswoman and you've spoken many places. The family has really taken it upon itself to try to continue Sarah's message. Can you each individually perhaps share that message as you see it, as you feel it, and as you try to communicate it to people?
You know, I thank you for calling me a spokesperson. I never considered myself that, but what happened was that I found people reaching to me, you know, being Norman and my sister and now my other brother live in Israel, and being that I'm here in New York, I found people reaching to me, you know, let's go to a rally, let's make a rally, let's organize a march, let's organize something. People wanted to do something. They wanted to help the brethren in Israel. And I found them reaching to me and looking to me to be an anchor, to be a leader, to be some sort of source of strength for them. And I shied away from it at first because it's not my style, it's not my...
Also, I can imagine you're so devastated in the beginning in any case to think of being a source of strength to other people is just
I still don't consider myself a source of strength for anyone, and I have been approached by different people to, you know, speak to women from September 11th who've gone through similar tragedies or other people, and I don't see myself as being a help to them, but I do find that if I speak and if I give people encouragement and, you know, like a rah-rah, let's go, let's do, let's help, that it moves them to action. And so I feel that if I do that for them, then I have to continue and keep doing it as often as I'm asked. And so.
And as I've heard you say, that's probably what your mother would want you to do, and also.
Yeah, I think she would be proud of that. It was not her style. She was not one to run after publicity or respect or any type of attention. She lived her life for the values that she believed in, for her belief in God, in Torah, in Judaism, and for her family. And everything she did was for that purpose. And so being in the spotlight wasn't what she cared about, but I think she'd be proud to know that I was helping affect other people move to action for Israel.
Good. Nora, maybe you can tell us a little bit about those values and morals that Sarah stood for and what you would like to tell the world also.
Well, August of 2000, Sarah made Aliyah. She went to Israel to live permanently. And the second she hit the ground in Israel, there was a smile that went on her face. The smile never left. Sarah and I, we went to Israel to raise our spiritual Jewishness, to improve our lives. Sarah began to go to classes every day. She would attend all different types of Jewish study classes all week long. In addition to that, she became an activist in the sense that when the Arabs took over Joseph's tomb, about a month, 2 months later, there was a question if Rachel's tomb was going to be taken over.
Right.
And Sarah joined a group of ladies, and I have to say ladies, not men, who took it upon themselves to make sure that this would not happen. Initially, they lived in a tent, and Sarah would live there every Tuesday for several hours.
And they would take turns,
They
so
take
that
rotation.
somebody was there the whole week long.
Right.
Amazing.
After that,
And let me let our audience know that that's a very heavily guarded area.
right,
Rachel's tomb is literally in the middle of Bethlehem, which is a completely Arab area.
right. After they stopped the ladies, the women, from living in the tent, the women started to ride the buses. And again, they would rotate, and Sarah would ride the bus every Tuesday for 3 or 4 hours. And then afterwards, she would go to Rachel's tomb
But you would ride the buses.
to make sure that people were going, to make sure that
Okay,
the point was not to give it up,
right.
to always have presence.
All right.
And that's what she would do. In addition to that, she became very heavily involved in a women's, I'll call it a yeshiva, like a post-high school program,
Right.
which she supported, which she went to, and she was very heavily involved.
Well, let me ask you a question. For the two of you living in Efrat, how did the fear of the Intifada or the situation there affect you? How does an Israeli today live life from day to day, knowing that when they get into a car to go to the city, or if they're going to go out to the local store to go shopping, or kids, I mean, in our school we raise money for bulletproof vests for children to be able to go from their home to the school. How do people function under such situations? For us here in America, it's so foreign, so difficult to imagine going through this from day to day.
Okay, I have to answer that. It's really two questions, and I have to give two answers. The first answer is almost what you asked Adina. About 2-3 weeks before Sarah's murder, we attended the third meal of the Sabbath. We went to a friend's house, and there were like 4 or 5 couples there, and there were some teenage young men there. And one of the teenage men was abusing Sarah and I concerning us living in Israel. How could you live here? There's an Intifada. And Sarah was very enraged. And
He was from America or
he was
where?
from Israel.
He was from Israel.
He was from Israel.
So he was upset at you
That's right.
being Americans coming to Israel.
Right. And living in Efrat. And Sarah confronted him and let him know that this is where every Jew belongs. This is very important. And she put him in his place. That evening, Sarah and I had a conversation of what would happen if one of us, or both of us, were murdered. And we agreed, and we could have taken two views. One, to run away, or the view that we took, which is to tell the world that it's important for Jews to go to Israel, to uplift their spirituality, to become involved in Judaism, and to help Israel. Living in Efrat now, to answer the second part of the question, while you're living in Efrat, it's like living in California. It looks wonderful. I walk an hour and a half a day. The children are playing basketball and soccer and going to school and laughing and involved in every activity. However, when you go out of Efrat, you wear a bulletproof vest.
Wherever you go.
Wherever you go. You ride in a bulletproof bus. You stay away from any public place where there's a possibility. So it's a double feeling. In one instant, you're so happy that you're in paradise, you're in Eretz Israel, you're in Israel. And in the same moment, you know you're in a battle, and war is right at your footsteps.
So it's like you always have to keep your guard up, but at the same time, once in a while you have that time of relief where you can be yourself, and it's great.
Right.
All right, thank you very much. I want to ask Sammy also. Sammy, you live in Long Beach, you work in Garden City. How did you feel when your mother wanted to make this aliyah and go off to Israel?
Well, I mean, I know I'd miss her, and I also know, like I said earlier, I know it was dreamed to always go there. She always wanted to live there.
Right.
She always believed that all Jewish
So you
people
knew
belong
that
to
for
Israel.
years, that was her goal.
Year after year.
She told you for a long time.
Yeah.
So you knew it was coming.
Right. Especially after a few years before that, her brother moved. Her younger brother moved with his wife and their children. And I think once he moved, it was like, made it definite for her, like, all right, we're going to go now.
Okay.
So I was happy for her, but I mean, of course I miss her. I mean, I always thought, I can always go over there and visit her, holidays, whatnot.
Right. And of course she's buried in Jerusalem. Because the laws of burial in Israel, for those of our audience who don't know, is that when somebody is killed in Israel, they're buried immediately. They don't even wait overnight.
Well, there was an exception to that because she's actually buried in the Gush area near
Okay, just
Efrat.
outside of the formal part of Jerusalem.
What happened was when she was in the ambulance, the medics saw that she had already died, and they knew that there was no real reason to take her to a hospital. And if they did enter Jerusalem, then they would be subject to the laws of Jerusalem burial.
area.
And so they didn't want to.
Adina, let me ask you a question also. I just want to, if you don't mind, dig in a little bit as far as how did this affect your emunah, your faith, your relationship with God, your relationship with the Jewish people, knowing that your mother had this great dream and she was there to do mitzvahs with Norman and to learn Torah and to spread light and kindness and joy, and here she goes and she ends up sacrificing her life for the sake of the lifelong mission that the Jewish people have had throughout history. Mm-hmm. And on the one hand, it's well, why don't you speak?
When my mother was murdered, instead of, as I may have wanted to do at times, and I'm sure others as well, crawling into my cocoon and burying myself in my self-pity and sorrow, I instead wanted to learn, in Judaism's view, why such a thing could happen, would happen, why God would choose to allow his people, and especially the best of the best, to be murdered in such a way. And I learned that it's not random, that every Jew that is murdered for being a Jew, every Jew that is murdered for the sanctification of the name of God or for his holy land, is chosen by God. That that in the Torah there is God gives his reason that they are chosen, that they are closer to him than other people. And I learned that literally moments after I arrived in Israel for the funeral. We were picked up by my uncle, my mother's brother, and a dear, dear friend of his who we actually consider to be an uncle because of their closeness. Mm-hmm. They picked us up from the airport, and he was sort of prepping us for what to expect. He said, listen, there's press all over the place, the streets are closed off, there's thousands and thousands of people. I just want you to know what's going on. We have security at the house so that nobody bothers the kids. He had from Israel arranged for security at my home in Woodmere.
Really?
For my children, to make sure that the press and that nobody would be bothering them. And he also informed me that that the ritual of purification of a body, of a dead person, which is done before every funeral, before, when a person dies, there's a certain ritual, that there was none done on my mother.
Right, you're not
that
supposed
for
to.
a person who dies who's murdered in such a way, in such a holy way, is not subject to these rituals because they are already pure, they are already holy. And I just couldn't believe my ears. I never heard of such a thing. It stunned me. It really amazed me, and I felt proud. Believe it or not, at that moment,
right,
on the way to my mother's funeral, I felt this pride. And then at the funeral, seeing the literally tens of thousands of people who did not know her, did not know us, but who came to show respect for their fellow Jew who died in such a way. And at our Shiva, the 7 days of Shiva, tens and 15s and 20s of thousands of people who came, who we didn't know, who came to just pay respect to another Jew.
Right.
I felt that it was a statement about my mother and about how she was murdered and why she was murdered.
What would your message be to our audience as a result of what you've gone through and how people might react to what's going on in Israel and to your personal tragedy?
There's a lot of messages about what's going on in Israel. I don't know what you want me to get into.
But
on a personal
basis.
note, my personal message is go to Israel. go to Israel. I've been there since my mother's murder. I've been there 6 times. I bring my children. I go with my husband. We travel. We take precautions. We're safe. We're nervous, but we love it. And the people there are grateful and loving and happy to have you. And it's where we belong. And my message is, don't be scared away. You know, September 11th showed us that you're not immune to terrorism.
Right. And as far as your personal trust in God and your relationship with God, your faith?
I think it's only grown. I think it's only made me want to emulate my mother more. My mother didn't only start becoming more religious and going to learning classes and taking on roles of activism when she moved to Israel. She'd been doing it for many, many years before. And right. I guess I was leaning on her, and now I'm taking it upon myself to carry it on.
Norman, could you answer that question for me? Thank you, Adina.
I think what Adina said about going to Israel is very important. I think you have to consider that there are those individuals who have a fear, and justifiably. If you have a fear, then support Israel. If you support it, buy goods, talk to your congressman, talk to anyone you're able to, and that's very important. That's the message.
We don't have too much time also, but your relationship with God also, your faith, how is that?
I'm gonna get into that.
Okay, just...
Okay. My faith has improved.
Really?
Yeah. I had choices, and I have questions, and I have anger. But I find I'm now studying many subjects in the morning and in the evening, trying to search for answers. And I've found that there are answers, and that it's important for every Jew to study.
Thank you very much, Norman. Sam, any last message you'd like to give our audience? All right. Just, I'm sure you love your mother and want to have the best for her. I'm sure she's looking down and having nachas from you, and all of you should only continue to have health and continue to bring light to your communities and do whatever you can to continue her memory. Her soul should be bound in the bond of eternal life, and we should know no more evil, no more tragedy. God willing, the Jewish people will be victorious, and we will be able to hold our head high all through the world. Mashiach shall come soon. We should have a return of all those who are abiding in the dust, and your mother, I'm sure, will be at the head of them.
Right.
Thank you very much for being with us. I hope you were able to get a little bit of a personal experience of what this family has gone through. And we shall only pray for peace in Israel, for strength for the people of Israel, for success for the soldiers of Israel. I will see you next week, same time, same station, for Jewish Spotlight. Shalom.